We kindly ask that guests please take their seats. Our next panel is ready to begin. The theme for the second panel is addressing the challenges of aviation network expansion in the Asia-Pacific region. We are pleased to have Mr. Rao again as our moderator, and I'll turn the time over to him to introduce the panelists and lead the discussion.
All right. Welcome back, everybody. I'll give you all a moment to filter back into the room. All right. I think we have critical mass or quorum, as they say. Welcome back, and we are now going to continue to our second panel, which, as you may recall, is talking about the challenges in expanding the network. Meaning, earlier we discussed what the opportunity was and how we could achieve it in some ways from a policy standpoint. This is more in terms of talking about the specifics of what the challenges are in terms of expanding the network. And just a bit of background here on this particular topic. Of course, aviation consists of policies and regulations and laws, but it also consists of a lot of nuts and bolts kinds of things, like we talked about pavement. Steve Morrissey in the first panel talked about air traffic control as an important piece. But there are also other important components to this. One, probably first and foremost, are qualified personnel. Trained professionals like pilots, mechanics, ground handlers, and so many others require extensive training, they require skill, they require qualifications. So that is a consideration and a huge factor in what it will take to achieve this potential, this promise of expanded opportunity. But there's also other challenges that have kind of emerged during and since the pandemic, which is supply chain issues. I think the delays and challenges facing both of the large aircraft manufacturers, Airbus and Boeing, are well known to most. And then, of course, there are other long-term persistent issues. We heard a bit about the challenges of producing sustainable aviation fuel at scale and at a price point that makes it economical to use on a routine basis. And so this panel, we have a very distinguished panel, and I encourage you to look at their bios because all of them have an interesting path to how they reach their current position. Mr. Yap Ong Heng, Senior Advisor to the Ministry of Transport Singapore, has held many key positions within his ministry, served in his country's Air Force. Ms. Rieko Nakayama, Deputy Director General at the Japan Civil Aviation Bureau and the Ministry of Land Infrastructure, Transport and Tourism, also has had a storied career within her ministry since joining it, including serving as in international affairs in rail, leading her ministry's tourism office in Paris for 3 years. Ms. Ronce Almond had a career in private practice as a lawyer, and then in the most recent FAA reauthorization bill, FAA Reauthorization Act of 2024, Ronce played a key role in negotiating that bill, and now he's of course at American Airlines as the Managing Director for International Government Affairs. Mr. Tadashi Matsushita, Executive Vice President, Industrial and Government Relations, has also had a storied career at ANA, including serving, leading government affairs and commercial efforts here in Washington, D.C., which is the first time I met him. And finally, but last but not least, certainly, Bob Letteney, Vice President, International Government Affairs at Delta. Also, his path took him through Capitol Hill and the House of Representatives, served in the Obama administration in several capacities. So with that, let me turn it over, starting with Mr. Yap, to provide some initial remarks, and we will have a panel discussion afterwards. Thanks.
Chairman Shukuri, distinguished panelists. Just wanted to start off by highlighting that Singapore, as an even smaller island state, aviation is a critical enabler for our connectivity, our economic growth, and for raising the living standards of our people. And I would even say that aviation is a lifeline for Singapore. Now, as we move on to talk about the larger ASEAN, which comprises the 10 Southeast Asian nations, ASEAN has adopted a vision to create an ASEAN economic community. And for realizing this ASEAN economic community, aviation is also going to be a key element to advance economic development and to provide for shared prosperity. So just to highlight the critical importance of aviation to Singapore as well as the whole ASEAN region. Now, the future of aviation is certainly bright. The International Air Transport Association, IATA, has forecasted that aviation in terms of passenger volumes will double by 2043. And out of this growth, 50% will be in the Asia-Pacific region. So as we are poised for tremendous growth in aviation, there are also headwinds ahead that we need to contend with. So in positioning ourselves to capture the opportunities from aviation growth, we must also address the challenges that will come our way. Just let me highlight a few key challenges, and these ranges from some high-level areas to the very technical areas. So starting off, of course, is continuing to enhance connectivity. Here, I would say that the critical challenge is that there are many air services agreements between countries and between regions that are still not liberal. And I think this presents a challenge, especially for airlines who would want to be able to have the full flexibility to be able to respond to market demand. So this is one key challenge that unfortunately I think has been there for a very long time. Of course, the other key challenge is in ensuring aviation safety. The record for aviation safety has, I think, been improving over the years. But unfortunately, as we saw in just the end of last year and the beginning of this year, it is quite clear that we cannot take aviation safety for granted. And if there is an aviation incident or an air accident, the confidence in air travel will be affected. So aviation safety is a foundation for air travel, and we must certainly address it. The other key challenge is capacity, and specifically capacity constraints. Here, I'm talking about constraints in airports, and that also affects the efficiency of moving passengers through the airport. But there is also capacity constraints in the air. There is a need to see how we can deal with the increasingly crowded skies. And of course, the last key challenge that I should mention is that we need aviation to grow sustainably. It is not sufficient for us just to continue to push aviation growth. It is important that we also ensure that there is environmental sustainability and decarbonization. Climate change is no longer a future threat. It is already with us, as we can see from the many weather events that have taken place all over the world. So it is important for aviation also to do its part in combating climate change. I just would like to end off by saying that I think in addressing these challenges, and I will be very happy to discuss what we can do about them later, the need for collaboration, among countries across the globe, among all stakeholders in the aviation ecosystem is very important. And here, of course, Japan, ASEAN, and the United States, we have very strong collaboration, but we can also extend this to many other partners in order to address the various challenges and realize the growth ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Yap. Nakayama-san, would you care to share some thoughts? I know you just give a keynote speech, but would you care to add some thoughts on top challenges?
Yes, I'd like to talk about just quickly about the challenges we're facing. The first is shortage of human resources, and including ground handlers and the pilot and air traffic controllers and aircraft mechanics and so on and so forth. And the second one is carbon neutrality, including self-production. And the third one is capacity of airport and airspaces.
Thank you, Nakayama-san. So Ronce, I understand you have a presentation you'd like to show us.
Yeah, if I can bring this slide deck up. Let's see. Well, before I get started, I just want to say thank you for JITTI and Mr. Chairman. My hat's off to you and your team who've done an incredible job to pull this conference together. I've been going to these JITTI conferences for over almost 2 decades now, and since I was just a young associate. And I want to congratulate JITTI for putting these conferences together because they see towards the future. And I remember back in around 2010 when we were looking at these conferences about what it means to liberalize Haneda at that time, and John Byerly was running around town doing his thing. And it was that forward-looking perspective that these symposiums allow that is so important. So congratulations to you. And I've worn many hats in my career. My favorite one is tourism. And so being a tourist in Tokyo under your incredible hosting Assistant Vice Minister was really a pleasure and honor. And to the 2.7 million Americans that have made it over to Japan last year, add me to the list again because I want to go back. Tokyo was so fantastic, and I put my running shoes on and I stayed at a hotel near the U.S. Embassy and made my way over to the Meiji Shrine, the Meiji Jinju, and it's one of those beautiful urban spots you can find in the world where the trees are rising, and there's a path, and it's quiet and contemplative, and you go there, but then you start thinking about the history of a place like that. You look back to 1868 and the Meiji Restoration, and the reason that happened, and why the United States and Japan and its initial involvement in touch points, and the role of technology and industrialization and the growth of that relationship over the years. And I'm proud to be sitting here today to know that aviation is part of the sector that brings our peoples together and our communities and our cultures. And it's a really incredible tale. And when we talk about some things we've talked about today already, I mean, we talked about the open skies agreements. And I would go back a generation before that to deregulation. And so you go to deregulation, and a generation later you have open skies, and a generation later we're here. And I think we have to look forward to where are we going next in terms of global aviation, and I think it's to be determined. And part of it's going to be the challenges that we're facing right now. So bringing this conference together and this panel to talk about challenges, I think, is completely appropriate, and hopefully this dialogue can help us look forward to the future. But we are facing some challenges, and that's what I'm going to talk about right now. So one of the things we've discovered after post-COVID is that we haven't gotten quite back there, right? In Asia, Europe, and other places, we've seen the rebound fully articulate itself and realized. But in Asia, we haven't surpassed our pre-pandemic levels. Part of that is because of particular markets. There's been an uneven rebound, and thankfully for places like Japan and Korea, we've seen a full restoration of demand and capacity. Therefore, but in places like we've talked about in the prior panel, places like China, we still see some challenges in terms of getting that capacity back, getting that demand back. And there's a number of reasons potentially for that. We've talked about some of the geopolitical problems and challenges that we have between the United States and China, and maybe that's flowing down into, for example, business travel and how that and tourism in general. So we have to think about that incredibly huge and important Chinese market moving forward. If you look at the numbers from Boeing, I mean, if one half of the aircraft produced in the world in the next 20 years could be going into the Chinese market. So this is a place where we know demand is going to be. So what does that mean for the global aviation market? Why do we have some such challenges in the Asia Pacific and growing our networks there? Well, there's different reasons. One of them is opportunity cost, right? Working for an airline and understanding, we got 130,000 people. We operate over 60 countries, 350 destinations. It's challenging, and deciding where those wide-body aircraft go is a pretty big decision for a company that's constrained in its capacity and its fleet. I mean, we have 1,500 aircraft, but when you get down to the wide-body fleet, it's very limited. And part of that is compounded by the aircraft delays in our supply chain. And let's just face it, but Boeing's had its challenges, Airbus has had its own challenges, and so that impacts our ability to grow long-haul networks. And it's doing a route like Haneda to JFK. That requires a dedication of a specific aircraft and of course highly trained crew that are associated with that. I mentioned it before, but it's worth mentioning again. Trade relations are important, and when there's difficulties in trade relations, that impacts our ability to grow the business. And so, addressing those trade relations and those challenges and complexities there will be important to growing our networks. And we talked about it already again, but it bears worth repeating. The Russian overflight situation is critical, a critical impediment to our ability to grow our networks. Why? Because of operational costs. I mean, the fuel cost and crew cost alone make it a hard decision to operate certain routes. We've seen that on the European side with some of the European carriers pulling out of the Chinese market because of operation costs and the ability not to compete evenly on those markets. And we heard from our colleagues from United how there's some concerns there as well. So it's a challenge, and I don't want to get into the Russian overflight just a little bit to illustrate those challenges. So if you look at our flights heading into Europe and then off to West Asia, you can see the kind of myriad of challenges we face in terms of where we can operate and where we can't operate, and how that impacts our ability to fly the most efficient routes. So these no-fly zones, these SFARs and NOTAMs, restrict our ability to operate in international airspace at the most efficient places. So it's, you could see that blue line is our Delhi route from JFK. We have to be careful, right? We've seen that the threat to air navigation is real. We went through that again 2 generations ago with KAL 007, led to Article 3 bis in the Chicago Convention. So these are lessons that we repeatedly learned throughout history of aviation, how critical it is to maintain safety in air navigation. So it's an inhibitor to our ability to fly. You know, if you look at Western Russia, that's where the threats are. You know, whether it's missile launches, airstrikes, other things, you know, these are things that our security teams have to deal with and understand in terms of what it means to operate heading into the Pacific region, the Asia-Pacific region, you know, from the West. But when you look out to the eastern part of Russian airspace, the threat level, it decreases. I mention that only because it potentially, if there's an opportunity for lifting restriction on airspace for U.S. operations in Russia, maybe the East is easier than the West. And we talked about it last panel, but this may illustrate it further, the difficulties in going to the Asia-Pacific when you can't operate in Russian airspace and how that impacts our ability to, again, have efficient operations into places like Incheon, Haneda, and Narita. So, you know, these are some of just, I concentrate on the Russian overflight issue because it's just one issue and these slides can bear it out. But there's other things we talked about, you know, supply chain and opportunity costs, et cetera. But happy to talk. I'm sorry I had to start with challenges. We can get to solutions later, but I wanted to lay that out. Thank you.
Thank you, Ronce. Matsushita-san, over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Before I make my short presentation, I'd like to highlight an exciting event coming up next month. Equally exciting as Cherry Blossom Festival here in Washington, D.C. From April 13th, the World Expo will be held in Osaka, Japan. And ANA is proud to be the official supporter of this great event. We believe Expo will be the hub of wisdom and collaboration, and we are thrilled to support its mission. So if you are traveling to Japan, if you plan to come to Japan, please consider ANA as your airline. We would be honored to welcome you on board. The theme of today's symposium highlights Japan's critical role as a pivotal hub connecting two vital regions. Looking ahead, passenger demand between Asia-Pacific region, especially North America and ASEAN, is projected to more than double. A little different from my the viewpoint from my colleague from American, but we are more optimistic about the future demand. Specifically, we anticipate an 80% increase by 2030 and staggering 140% increase by 2040 compared to 2023 demand level. ANA recognizes the importance of meeting this soaring demand by ensuring efficient, smooth, and comfortable transportation of both passenger and cargo. This is crucial not only for ANA's growth going forward, but also our contribution on the Japanese economy and hopefully make some positive impact on the global basis as well. By the way, we were honored to receive the prestigious Airline of the Year award from Air Transport World for 2025. And also, we achieved a 5-star rating by Skytrax for 12 consecutive years. We take pride in these accomplishments, but when it comes to the available seat kilometer ranking, globally, ANA is on 24th. Ranking is 24th globally. This is not good enough. I have to admit that the scale of our international route network and connectivity lags behind those of global hub airlines in the world. If you can take a look at the hub structure here, the Turkish Airlines Istanbul Airport, Singapore Airlines at Changi, Korean Asiana at Incheon, versus our hub structure at Narita Airport and Haneda. It's obvious that we need to add capacity going forward and work on the connectivity more. In fact, we are committed to actively invest in the resources and to strengthen this hub structure going forward. However, we face primarily three challenges going forward. Firstly, there's an issue of aircraft delivery. The current instability of aircraft industry supply chain is significant concern to us. We're witnessing delays in component supply, escalating raw material costs, and logistical disruptions. And to achieve our planned fleet renewal and route expansion, it's absolutely critical that aircraft deliveries adhere to their scheduled timelines. Secondly, we must address the growing challenge of a labor shortage. In Japan, working age population is projected to decline at a significant 17% by 2040. This is an unavoidable trend, and ANA is actively investing in securing necessary resources going forward to support the aviation industry. But adding to this concern is the anticipated mass retirement of pilots and mechanics within Japanese aviation sector in the next decade. This demographic, primarily those in the 50s, represents a substantial portion of our current workforce. Approximately 40% of our pilots at the moment is over 50. As we look to expand our international routes, this looming pilot shortage poses a significant bottleneck. And finally, the fragmentation of aviation decarbonization. CORSIA was meant to be the global framework, but we're seeing the conflicting local rules. So instead of unified approach, we have a double burden due to overlapping regulations. The EU, European Union SAC mandate, impacting even non-EU airlines exemplifies this, creating extra costs and conflicting with CORSIA. The EU also hints at expanding EU ETS to international flights. This creates an uneven playing field. We need a consistent global framework to enable effective and fair decarbonization. Collaboration is essential. Thank you.
Thank you, Matsushita-san. And now I'll turn it over to Bob Letteney of Delta.
Thank you, Naveen. I'd like to add my thanks to Chairman Shikuti and the JITTI team. Like Ronce, I've been coming to these for over 2 decades, and we at Delta appreciate the invite. I think this particular forum is extremely timely. Aviation is all over the media, and I'm going to try to get through my presentation as quickly as possible so we can get to discussion, because I really think the Q&A and discussion is really important. I also want to thank Naveen and recognize Naveen. You couldn't have found a better moderator, not only on knowledge of transportation and aviation, but also Japan and Japanese. He spent his entire career really looking at these issues, but also has a deep understanding of the region. So, kudos to you and thanks again. So I'm not going to get right into challenges. I do want to give a little bit of an overview of the Delta network, and then we can talk a little bit about challenges. But I want to give a brief kind of snapshot of how we serve Asia Pacific. Let me start with Haneda. So we have 6 gateways into Haneda: Atlanta, Detroit, Minneapolis, Seattle, LA, and Honolulu, all with service into Haneda. And I think Nakayama-san mentioned 39 million passengers in 2024, tourism passengers. Cindy, 9.2 million maybe Americans go over. We have seen a huge increase since 2019, 40% increase in travel to Japan. Japan, for Delta, has really become a point-to-point market. The way we serve Asia is through Incheon. We do not have a Japanese partner, unlike our competitors. We partner with Korean Air. That partnership helps get folks into Asia, but it also helps people get into Japan. So we serve 13 additional markets through Incheon, from Sapporo to Osaka to Fukuoka and others. Last year, I think it was about 45,000 passengers that connected Incheon back into Japan, which is good, really good for tourism. So just on the next slide, despite not having a Japanese partner, we still have the bulk of our seat capacity going into Japan. Japan's 36% of our seats, as you can see from the pie chart here. Korea, 32%. China, which we'll get to in a little bit, just 13%. Taipei, 6%. And South Pacific, 13%. Because we're a point-to-point market, unlike some of our competitors, and maybe ANA, we're not flowing a lot of traffic over Japan into Asia, so the traffic is actually staying in Japan. So 88% of our traffic gets off the plane in Tokyo. Another 8% actually connects on Japanese airlines through interline agreements to go other places in Japan. So about 96% of traffic on our planes is staying in Japan, which is good news for travel and tourism between our countries. I think Steve had a similar slide, but on the U.S. side, this really shows how we're connecting people, broad coverage from across the United States into Japan and Asia Pacific. Really, the reach of Delta's network can really get you anywhere. These are all major hubs, so you can get one stop to Japan quite quickly. And then just quickly, 2024 year of U.S.-Japan tourism, through the leadership of our president over there, Victor Osumi, did a lot of events supporting sister cities, Fukuoka, Atlanta, sports teams, different educational things. So we look forward to continuing promoting travel and tourism to hopefully try to reach that 2030 goal. I'm not going to get into all of the aviation challenges because I think we can get into that through the discussion. But bringing Haneda into full open skies, we'll talk a little bit about that. We've already talked about the lack of demand, really, between the U.S. and China, and Ronce did an excellent job on the Russia overflight issue. But look into getting into the questions, and thank you again for having us.
Thank you, Bob. So I think we heard some really interesting perspectives from each of our panelists. And, we began these presentations talking about what are the challenges. And we heard quite a few, including but not limited to capacity, aging workforce, a workforce pipeline, overflight, and a number of other things. So starting with that, I'm going to actually turn it to our two panelists that traveled the furthest to be here today, Mr. Yap and Ms. Nakayama-san. Just in terms of the barriers to connectivity, starting maybe with Nakayama-san first, can you share some of the initiatives that your ministry and agencies are undertaking in the Asia Pacific region And I think on your slide, you showed some of the things that you're doing on the airport infrastructure. Why don't we start with you, and then I'm going to turn to Mr. Yap.
Yeah, thank you. So I would like to talk about the challenge we are facing. Particularly, I would like to explain what we have been doing to address the issue of the shortage of the workforce. And actually, the biggest challenge we faced right after the pandemic was the shortage of ground handlers. And as an immediate response, the aviation industry has been working on to improve working conditions and wage levels. It's just like a kind of straightforward way. And also, our ministry is also supporting efforts by the industry for recruitment of ground handlers, such as holding joint job fairs or aviation workforce at each airport. But at the same time, we also expect to face the issue of shortage of other type of aviation personnel like pilots and aircraft mechanics. And so we are now working on to about some kind of reform about those with regard to those personnel. So I would like to explain some example, and one is reforming the qualification of aircraft mechanics for the effective use of human resources, or streamlining the training process by introducing a more expedited pilot training program, or expanding the talent pool by increasing the number of female pilots, for example. And another approach, apart from some regulatory reform, another approach could be the introduction of labor-saving technology. And for example, the other day, I have a chance to visit and inspect a new type of towing machine at Osaka Itami Airport, and actually together with the delegation from CS, Singapore. And so with this new machine, so there is no longer to drive the towing car. And instead, the big aircraft can be pushed back by operating just a small tablet. So one of the very big advantage about this, the introduction of this new machine is, I heard that is a training period for workers can be significantly shortened compared to conventional towing cars, which the driver need, which requires drivers. And also, I would like to touch upon the importance of capacity building for countries in even more serious constraints. So last year, we provided Pacific Islands countries as a capacity building program. But I understand that Singapore has more experience in supporting capacity building for Asian countries. So I would like to learn more about from you. Thank you.
Thank you, Nakayama-san. Yes, I actually was going to say the same thing, that Singapore is kind of in the heart of ASEAN. It is a commercial hub. It is home to Singapore Airlines, which is globally recognized as frankly an iconic airline. And so within your region, you identified a number of challenges. How is Singapore working to address them?
I'll go straight to the point on the challenge with respect to connectivity and air services. For Singapore, like the US, which has its open skies policy, we have adopted a liberal air services policy. And that means that we would like to enter into liberal air services agreements with other countries or group of countries. Here, 60 of our air services agreements with other countries are open skies, and we certainly aim to conclude more of these. But this also extends to ASEAN. We have been working with the other ASEAN countries in terms of liberal air services regime for ASEAN. In 2009, we concluded the basic agreements, and then over time, intra-ASEAN, we are also open skies already. And because of that, we have now started to move to have agreements between ASEAN and other countries and other regional blocs. So for example, ASEAN already has an air transport agreement with China, and we have also an air transport agreement with the European Union. And this is the first bloc-to-bloc air transport agreement in the world. So these agreements, I think, have allowed to move slightly more into creating, the flexibility for airlines to fly, between countries and between regions. The next area that I should talk about is on capacity constraints, and here I would like to echo what Nakayama said about manpower shortage. I mean, when you talk about capacity constraint, it is not just about the infrastructure and so on. The manpower shortage also plays a part. Here, of course, in Singapore and in many of the ASEAN countries, we are all going through a development expansion phase for our airports. But the problem is that when you build airports, when you expand airports, it takes a long time. So what is now needed is to try and optimize the capacity that you have now in the sort of airports that the various countries have. And here again, I echo what Nakayama said, that I think what is necessary is now to use innovation and technology, improve productivity, improve efficiency, basically trying to sort of milk whatever capacity you can get from the infrastructure and the resources currently available. So in Singapore, we are very, very keen to work with partners. We have, for example, set up an international center for aviation innovation to work with partners on transformational solutions for airports and various other areas in order to be able to remove the constraints. We have also set up an international aviation lab in Changi Airport. And here again, we want to work with partners, pool resources and expertise, again, to come up with solutions for airports. All this to try and basically create more capacity and to try and improve efficiency. And this helps also with the manpower shortage, because if you have automation, digitalization, now the use of artificial intelligence, many other new technological areas, this can certainly address the constraint before us. In the case of the skies, constraints in the skies, here again, Singapore is developing the next generation air navigation system, something that we think is very important in order to be able to ensure, again, capacity and efficiency for air traffic. But more than that, within ASEAN, we have agreed on a seamless ASEAN Sky approach. And here, backing it up, is Air Navigation Services Master Plan that we have developed with various elements where we want to see the various ASEAN countries implementing these various elements that will certainly reach seamless ASEAN skies. And I just now would just move to sustainability. It is quite clear that there is a need to balance between aviation growth and aviation sustainability and decarbonization. We can't move, towards one end or the other. Because if we focus on just environmental sustainability, we dampen growth, this will have a significant impact on economic development and so forth and so on. So in Singapore, we believe very strongly that there is a need to balance aviation growth and aviation sustainability, aviation decarbonization. So we have developed what we call a sustainable air hub blueprint. It has various goals and targets. It has also various measures that we would like to implement to achieve this. With that, we have also, under our chairmanship of the ASEAN Air Transport Working Group, worked with all the other ASEAN countries to develop the ASEAN Sustainable Aviation Action Plan. And again, this action plan will bring all ASEAN countries again on this journey of growing aviation sustainably. And one very key area is the use of sustainable aviation fuels. And I understand that will be, again, a question later. I go back to really the fundamental, aviation safety. In all that we do in growing aviation, we must put aviation safety as the key priority. And here, I would say that there is a need to constantly look at the aviation regime, safety regime, the aviation safety oversight, and even more important, aviation safety culture. In Singapore, we got all the chief executives of the major aviation companies in Singapore to sign on to an aviation safety charter. That was when we were recovering from COVID-19 pandemic, and we felt that it was very important that as the aviation ramps up, it is very important that there is a very strong culture in the whole aviation ecosystem prioritizing aviation safety. And this again is something that we have moved to broaden it to across the ASEAN. And now we have 5 of the ASEAN countries coming together to share safety data and information. This will help us to identify safety risks, safety hazards, safety trends. And the main idea is to try and prevent an incident or accident from happening. So these are the various ways that, the various initiatives we have taken in order to address the various challenges. Thank you.
Thank you. That was great. So now I'm going to pivot over to the left side of the stage, my left. And so we have on the stage several of the leading airlines from Japan and the United States, and each of your companies, respective companies, have unique business models, unique fleets, different networks, different strategies. So from each of your perspectives, Matsushita-san, Bob, and Ronce, can you share just what collaborative initiatives you would like the governments of Japan, the U.S., Singapore, and ASEAN to undertake in response to addressing the things we've discussed? Whoever would like to start.
I'll start, I guess. No, excellent question. I'll go back to my last slide, the first point there. I think the goal is to increase tourism, increase connectivity, not only to Japan but beyond Japan. And I think it's less a challenge than an opportunity. I think there's an opportunity, and the governments have done an incredible job. There's been a lot of progress, but there's an opportunity to bring Haneda fully into open skies. And I'm sure most folks in the audience know, but Haneda is really an outlier when you look globally. Governments negotiate access for the airlines. The governments decide where we can fly, how often we can fly. It is really a throwback to pre-open skies. And I think there's an opportunity to better match passenger demand with different gateways. I think bringing Haneda into open skies, Heidi had mentioned about operational flexibility and open code share, gateway flexibility, liberalized slot regime. It's still pretty highly restrictive. So I think, I'll just close with, I think there's an opportunity that presents itself to the government really for the benefit of passengers. I mean, that's what we're about, right? It needs to be in the public interest, and clearly bringing Haneda fully into open skies, I think, is not only in the U.S. interest, but into Japan and ASEAN's interest.
Thanks, Bob. Matsushita?
Yes. I touched upon the issue on pilot and mechanic shortage. To meet growth targets, we need 10% more pilots and 20% mechanics going forward. You know, there's no silver bullet to solve this issue. You know, the efficient use of resources, more productivity, improving training, expanding recruitment, and potentially by raising retirement ages in Japan. And in terms of pilot, we believe that there are areas where the government can take the lead in establishing global standards in a more collaborative manner. I know this is a sensitive matter in the United States, but pilot shortage will hinder future business growth, and we need to approach this matter taking the interest of various stakeholders into account. So we strongly support the Japanese government's joint proposal with Canada and other nations at the ICAO Air Navigation Conference to raise the pilot age limit based on advancements in medical and aviation technology and improved health and operational safety. Given Japan's future demographic challenges, this is a crucial matter for Japanese airlines. And we urge all governments and ICAO to demonstrate strong leadership on this matter. And you know, my colleagues here have touched upon the Russian overflying Russian airspace. We feel the same. It's you know, this relates to the labor shortage matter as well, because our current European route require approximately 40% more resources because of you know, avoiding Russian airspace. And in terms of fuel, an approximate 20% increase. So in terms of decarbonization as well, this is a very critical matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Matsushita and Ronce.
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and hopefully this gets the, you know, my bit on solutions. And I think one of them is just in front of us, which is to continue the open skies policy. I mean, I mean, I say that out loud as if it's a matter of fact, but as we know in this world, policies change very quickly. So I would say, you know, please maintain open skies as an approach to air traffic and liberalization. And you know, in general, lowering the barriers to entry for air operations, you know, I wasn't disagreeing with you in terms of the market. I think the demand side is there in the Asia Pacific. It's the supply side that where we run into issues. And so if we can lower the barriers to entry, whether that's on slots, taxes and fees, we've talked about, you know, different regulatory approaches to decarbonization, which are not helpful. You know, there's other ways, one-stop security, a program that TSA is unveiling. These are type of things that can help facilitate travel. Of course, visas, ensuring that there's timely issuance of visas and making sure the State Department has the capacity and folks to allow that to happen. And, it gets back to why on the supply side, some of the fixes that we've seen over time. I mean, if you look at the whole alliance structure and networks we have today, in a way, it's creative design around barriers to entry and regulatory hurdles, right? Whether it's ownership and control of a U.S. carrier or, national security concerns or, traffic rights. These code shares and ATI and et cetera are ways that the market has responded to these barriers to entry. And so I think you'll continue to see creative commercial arrangements. And I would say to governments and bodies that are overseeing this, like allow allow, of course, the consumers benefit in the public interest, allow this experimentation to continue, because this is the airlines responding to what the cards they're given. And so we've seen the joint ventures and we've seen ATI, and I think we need to ensure that there's a common regulatory approach on some of these issues, so that each time an alliance member is going into a different market, they're facing the same type of scrutiny as opposed to some type of disparate world where we have to meet different tests wherever we go. And and of course I'd be remiss not to say thank you to our critical partners like Japan Airlines, Fiji, Qantas, others that help us in Asia Pacific. But again, this alliance structure, I think, will continue to develop and grow, and I think it's part of unlocking the secret of the next 20 years in terms of global aviation. And finally, back to standardization, it goes without saying, but we had the ICAO assembly this year, and it's really important the role ICAO plays in providing a common framework for the world and harmonized standards and different approaches, and ensuring that we are connected. And this predates. The Chicago Convention predates the close of World War II. So we've been at this for a long time, and that's why I'm so proud that Japan has put forward Ambassador Onuma. And it is my hope and desire that Onuma-san is able to be elected as the president of ICAO, because I think his type of background and skill set that he brings from his long career from a technical side, from a safety side. He can bring that type of leadership that I think that we need at ICAO, and we need to ensure that ICAO plays a leading role in global aviation in order to have that safe and orderly growth that is part of the Chicago Convention's mission for ICAO.
Thank you, Ronce. So we are fast approaching time. So what I'm going to do is jump to the question from the audience that we received, and then try to do a quick summary wrap up. So the question we received relates to, and it's been mentioned, it was the tragedy on January 29th here near DC, and then several others. But the event here sadly broke a streak of 16 years of accident-free aviation, commercial aviation, and as I think Mr. Yap said, made the point very clearly. Safety is the North Star for all of this. If without a safe system, none of this exists. Nothing else really matters. So it's the paramount consideration. So maybe starting with Nakayama-san, and maybe if you could maybe say words about the cooperation between your regulators, Singapore and Japan, to say a few words about what's being done on safety, and then time permitting, we'll hear from our airline panelists.
Yes, so with regard to safety, so I would like to point out the importance of making use of the lessons learned from the actual aircraft accident for further safety of aviation. And so as you know, in Japan, a tragic accident occurred in January last year. So which was a plane crash accident on the runway at Haneda Airport. And although the accident is still under the investigation by the Japan Transport Safety Board, but we are now we already took some actions based on the factors believed to have caused it. And so in addition, we are now preparing a legislation bill to promote more safety. And so I believe that it is also important to learn from accidents occurred in other countries as well. So in that, with this regard, I think we can cooperate with other countries and governments to increase the safety.
Mr. Yap, would you like to say a few words?
Well, I would just like to say that Singapore and Japan, we closely cooperate on all aviation matters. We entered into a high-level strategic framework arrangement in 2022. And then under that arrangement, essentially, Singapore and Japan, we cooperate on everything in aviation. And when it comes to safety, we share best practices, we share lessons learned. In fact, a team from Singapore just visited Japan and learn about some of the things that the Japanese are doing, for example, in terms of empowering all aviation personnel to look out for safety issues and so on, and to report them or to address them. We think that's very important. You create a very strong safety mindset among all aviation personnel, something that Singapore wants to learn from Japan. And the cooperation, as I say, extends to many other areas, including, for example, air traffic management. I think Ms. Nakayama mentioned in her opening remarks or basically her keynote speech about trajectory-based operations project, which I think is going to revolutionize air traffic management. Thanks.
Thanks. And I know we are actually at time, so but I do want to give a moment to our airline colleagues to make a comment. I know, Ronce, is this something you worked on, it's affected your airline? And then I will conclude.
Yeah, no, thank you. And first of all, I want to express my gratitude to everybody in the room and our speakers that have spoke such kind words with regard to the accident. AA Flight 5346 is a moment in time. It's a moment in history. It's a moment to learn from. First and foremost, it's a moment for the families of the victims. We had 67 people that were killed, and until you live through one of those moments, it's hard to describe the pain and the anguish that's associated with it. And I had dealt with the Colgan families and the Max families and others in legislative reforms and safety reform, but I never understood it in this way. And so my heart goes out to all that really suffered from this accident directly. And one thing that I learned is that through time, our aviation system has created nets to capture, sadly, these instances. And that includes having a family assistance plan that airlines have to enable them, the go teams that are available to make this, to action when something like this happens. My hat's off to the NTSB and the first responder community, which are incredible professionals and face just in extreme circumstances in dealing with a tragedy like this. And so we have the opportunity to learn from this, and I know we will. And air traffic control modernization is absolutely critical as a part of that. We have over 3,000 controllers short of what we need. We looked at it in the FAA reauthorization bill. We tried to do what we could. You have a pipeline. You can either expand, you can either thicken the pipeline in the middle, you can get more people on the front end, or you can extend the pipeline on the back end in terms of like pilot age or other things like that. On the front end, getting more people in, that means recruiting women and other people that are underserved in terms of our aviation pipeline. And in the middle, increasing pay. We had at American itself deals with our labor unions over the last year to make it more attractive to be working in aviation. But for our air traffic controllers, we absolutely need to do a better job in recruiting and building that workforce, building the capacity in Oklahoma City in terms of the academy, and getting the best first-in-class technology into our systems. And I know that Congress is invested in this. Thankfully, the President has focused on this, and Secretary Duffy is also made this a priority. So it's getting the attention it deserves, and we just need to carry through and make sure this happens and learn from others like our friends in Japan, in terms of what we can do better to make safety, because safety impacts all of us, and it should be ultimately our North Star.
Thank you, Ronce. So with that, I will just quickly summarize. I think we heard a lot about the challenges that exist, whether they're workforce related or related to sustainability, and I think everyone agrees safety. I think I will conclude by observing that civil aviation international civil aviation uniquely requires collaboration and cooperation across borders. And it extends from like runway signage, but also to all of the topics that we heard here, whether it's producing fuel in adequate quantities, ensuring that we learn lessons from the tragedies of January 29th. And so with that, I think, I think the future, with the hard lessons learned, future's bright. I think there are a lot of people here that are working hard towards realizing these goals and preventing future tragedies. And with that, let me thank the panelists for their time, and then turn it over to our Master of Ceremonies. Thank you all.
Thank you very much for your valuable insights. This is the end of our program. We would appreciate your feedback if you could please complete the survey at your seats or via an email, which will be sent shortly. The content of the symposium will be posted on our website, gtusa.org, in the next few days for anyone interested in viewing. We will also be sharing some of the slides as well. If you enjoyed this symposium and would like to stay informed of our upcoming events, please join our mailing list or follow us on Facebook, X, and LinkedIn. A reception will now begin in the foyer. Thank you very much for attending this symposium today, and please have a wonderful evening.